This is the new Leviton Decora light switch. And like the receptacle that they have made, on the side you will see that we do not have any terminal screws like we do on our standard light switches. This is basically as though Leviton took a light switch and took Wago lever nuts and integrated them into the light switch itself. And over here on the side, we've got these two black levers, which is for our line and our load. And then over here on the other side, we've got this lone lever up here in the top, this green lever, which is for the ground wire. Like most switches and receptacles, we also have a strip gauge. What's great about this one that I like is it's kind of out of the way. It's here on the corner, and that is there so that you are guaranteed to strip off the proper amount of insulation off of the wire so that when you go to insert it into one of the ports, it is at the proper length, you have a good connection, and you don't have any excess sticking out of the back. So you can use that strip gauge by taking your new wiring, putting it up into the strip gauge, marking it with a finger, and then just stripping off that amount of insulation. Then from there, the way that it works is you just flip up the lever of the corresponding port that you want to insert a wire into. So in this case, we'll flip this up for our line wire, and then we'll just take our wire and we'll just insert it into that back port there. And then once we've got it seated, then we just flip that lever down. It makes a loud clicking noise, which is letting you know that it is locked into place. This switch can handle wire sizes from 14 gauge up to 12 gauge wire. What's also pretty cool about these is they have testing ports so that you can test for voltage on either your line or your load terminals. Whereas on their receptacle, they do not have any of those ports that you can test the voltage on. So that's a pretty cool feature that they include on the light switches. Another cool feature, like the receptacles, they have these little nodules and these notches to where if you've got a double gang box and say you're wanting to install two of these switches, or maybe you want to install a switch and a receptacle in that double gang box. Well, what those are for is if you take those two devices and put them up next to each other, you can actually insert the nodule into those little cutouts, and it fits together kind of like a puzzle piece would. And that is so that you can make sure that both devices are lined up with each other perfectly, they're both level with each other, and they're both the correct spacing apart. I did a video on this receptacle already, and while I do like this, I do think it definitely has a purpose. It is incredibly safe and quick for DIYers or your typical homeowner that might not know a ton about electrical in order to install this without having a ton of difficulty or run into making some of the common mistakes that a lot of people can make when installing these types of devices. So I certainly have nothing against these at all. I actually think that they're a really cool idea, and I think that they will only get better. Now, this video is not about this receptacle. It's not about receptacles in general, but I say all of that because I really like this light switch, maybe more so than I do the receptacle. And the reason for that is because switches, your standard lights, even your incandescent bulbs do not pull a large load. And the more we advance, we're all pretty much going to LED lights, which take almost no electricity at all. So I'm not concerned at all in any way about this light switch causing me any issues either right off the bat or even into the future, because the internal parts of this are made just as well as your standard single pole switch. And there's just not going to be a ton of demand put on this switch in order for me to worry about it failing. And coming from a safety standpoint, especially for a homeowner, I don't think that you can get a device any safer than these devices here between the receptacle and also the light switch. And that's because all of the components are internal. Whereas on your standard light switch, for instance, you've got these terminal screws that jut out, or once they're screwed down, you still have the ability for some metal to make contact with those, and that obviously can cause arcing or other problems that can happen in the future, especially on a poor install. So now I'm going to show you exactly how quick and easy this is to install, and I'm also going to show you the proper ways of removing and replacing a light switch. So the first thing we want to do is make sure there's no power going to that light circuit. So we need to turn off the circuit breaker that is supplying the power. Then once that circuit breaker's off and you flip the switch and no lighting comes on, then we can remove the switch cover. Then once the cover's off, in the rare event that the light switch may just be malfunctioning, I always like to check with a tester to make sure that the power is in fact off. Now I can remove the switch from the box. At this point I can remove all the wires from the switch. And it's always best practice when removing the wires to start with the hot wires first, and then I'll move over to the ground. It's the opposite when then connecting the wires to a device. Now that I've got the switch removed, now I'm just going to cut off all of the loops that are currently on these wires, and then I'm just going to re-strip the insulation. All right, so now we're ready to hook up our new Leviton light switch. So we're going to start off with the ground wire. So we'll just flip up this green ground lever, and we're just going to insert the bare copper wire into this hole back here where it says G and D, which is short for ground, and where the green ground lever is. Once that's inserted and seated, we'll flip the green lever down. Now for me, I've got neutral wires in this box. For those of you that don't know, neutral wires on a single pole switch do not ever get connected to the light switch. So there won't even be a place on the light switch for a neutral wire to get connected to. Your neutral wires will just be connected all together and pushed into the back of the box. This is completing the circuit between the line wire bringing the power in and then to whatever fixture it is that you are trying to operate with this switch. Now we've got two black wires. One is going to be line and one is going to be load. In the case of a single pole switch like this one here, it doesn't really matter which one goes where on the switch itself. Now, if you had a three-way switch, or maybe you had a smart switch or a timer switch, then you would need to know which one of these is your line or your hot wire and which one is your load wire, which is going on to the fixture. But in the case of a single pole switch, we can put either black wire in either of the holes. But just for the sake of OCD, I'm going to put the wires on the switch where they were on the original switch. So in order to do this, I'll take one of my black wires and I will flip up one of the black levers on the light switch. I will just insert it into the hole here on the back. Now that that's seated, I can flip that lever down. Then I'll just take my remaining black wire, flip up the remaining black lever where we don't have a wire yet, put it into the back of the switch into that hole, and then once it's seated, flip the lever down. So now the wiring is done on the switch, but we're not done yet. We can't screw this into the box yet because this switch comes with these wings on the top and the bottom. And since we're going into a standard size box, it's not overcut. We don't need to worry about having this additional height. We need to go ahead and break both of those wings off of the top and the bottom of the light switch. And that can be easily done just by taking some pliers and working that plastic back and forth, and eventually they will just break off. And now at this point, we can push everything into the box and screw down the light switch into the box. And then we can put our new cover plate on and snap everything into place. And now I can turn the circuit breaker back on and make sure the light switch works. Now, if you don't want to just take my word for it and you'd like to actually see that these make a good connection and the wires can't just fall out or be pulled out easily, I did a video very recently where I go over their new receptacle, which is just like the switch where it's got the levers on the side. And in that video, I do a little bit of testing where I go and I try and pull the wires out of the back of this receptacle. And I also show you how it compares with the quick connects or the backstabbing on your standard receptacle or switches. So if you'd like to see those tests and see my overview of their new receptacle, I'll post a link to that video right over here. As soon as you click on it, it'll take you directly to it. If not, or you've already seen that video, I hope that you found this video to be interesting. And if you did, if you could do me a huge favor, hit that thumbs up button right down below. And of course, if you have any questions or comments still, you can leave those down in the comment section. And I'll catch you all in the next one. See ya.